Welcome back to Bitcoin Season 2. Trump is promising to pump your bags, but I haven't seen him do anything yet. He's launched a meme coin, which is halved since its peak on Saturday, and he's promised to do a lot of things that a lot of us Bitcoiners want, but I haven't seen much of that yet. I'll go into that and how this kind of relates to the Bitcoin Season 2 ecosystem here. This is your metrics heavy, more charts heavy stream. I normally do this on Mondays, but yesterday was the inauguration. And then on the back half of this, I have Alec with Oyl Dynamics talking about ALKANEs. Yes, you degens have been frothing at the mouth trying to figure out what the hell this is about. And the answer is it's actually probably be a little more technical than you are prepared for, but I'll ask him all those questions. I'll bring him in here at the back half of this. But before that, let's just go into some metrics here. So, if you remember, let's roll the clock back. Only 3 months. Trump was very clear that he wanted to, quote, free Ross day one. Now, I believe he has maybe 60 more minutes before the sentence commutation 24-hour deadline ticks over. And as of now, I have not seen, this is 1 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. So I have not seen that he has pardoned anything. I know he wrote some commutations and he signed a lot of executive orders last night, but nothing so far. So I think Donald Trump has failed to free Ross on day one. But again, sometimes there's a lot on these guys' plate. But this isn't the only thing. Trump almost also said National Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. If you want to know, more details on that, we wrote a newsletter. Blockspace Media. You can go read our TLDR on Trump's promises. And then we also have the crypto-friendly SEC and Crypto Advisory Council that during Trump's Nashville keynote this past summer, he said he will have laws and regulations, quote, written by people who love your industry rather than people who hate it. This was in direct pushback against Elizabeth Warren's very harsh movement against the crypto industry. Well, the pendulum is swinging back, but how far is actually swinging back, and has anything actually happened yet? I think a lot of people are probably sitting here going, wow, Trump, pump my bags. But I would say to you, listener, just 36 hours ago, we did have another all-time high in Bitcoin. It ticked over $109,000, and we're currently sitting at, I believe, $106,000. We are casually resting over 100K. But has this then trickled into the other Bitcoin denominated assets like ordinals, runes, other types of tokens, different staking protocols? Well, let me do the numbers here. Let's start by pulling up this chart from Coinmetrics. Jameson Lopp, who was on this pod a couple months ago, he made this observation from Coinmetrics that Bitcoin ETFs launched a year ago this month, and they now hold over 1.1 million Bitcoin. This is 5.7% of the supply. These are largely held through just custodians. Almost all of this Bitcoin is held through Coinbase custody with an exception or two. So BlackRock now owns over, half of your ETF Bitcoin, which is held on Coinbase. And this is certainly an upward force for Bitcoin price itself. This is yet to have any kind of connection to the secondary assets on chain. Speaking of those secondary assets, let's just take a look. Here's Magic Eden. I know a lot of you are glued to this page day in, day out. Since the last Roundup live stream 7 days ago, almost all of your top 10 collections are down. Puppets, No Monks, Cats, Based Angels, Runestone, Frogs, all down double digits percent except for Cats. OMB and the Trump digital trading cards, which is Trump's official Ordinals collection, those are up. OMB speculation is that they are minting, or rather inscribing a new collection. If you saw this, you saw the classic signature major national news event. OMBs come, or things that look like new OMBs come through on chain. and be seen like being inscribed. The art looks very, very cool, but this is unconfirmed. These are new assets. They have black eyes instead of orange and red and green. I won't dwell too much on this. But uh I want to pull up Domo's dashboard here. I often refer to this dashboard as Dune dashboard. Um just comparing the Ethereum and the Ordinals inscriptions trading volume. And we can see here that throughout the majority of 23 and early 24, we saw secondary marketplaces for Ethereum NFTs versus inscriptions NFTs. We saw those almost reach parity depending on the month in terms of overall market volume. Since then, we've seen a modest decline. This past month, Bitcoin uh, was roughly 12%. If we're going to just forget Solana exists, which is another conversation, Bitcoin was roughly 12% compared to Ethereum's 88% of all trading volume. Now, this does not account for the vibe shift towards Solana post Trump meme coin launch. But again, I don't have an easy chart for that pulled up. One of the major drivers of the decline in assets this past week is probably both just the market is not that interested in these secondary assets, but then also we saw some major liquidations on your lending protocols. Here's the newest dashboard from Liquidium, which is the Ordinals and Runes and BRC20 lending platform. Lock these assets up into a DLC, which if you want to know what that is, listen to my most recent interview with Shudu. I'm sorry, with Shazan last week. But Liquidium, it's the most popular like lending platform. We could like look at the data and we can see that the weekly loans volume on for the Ordinals ecosystem this past week was over 2,000 events. Now, this is not total 2,000 Bitcoin, but this is there over 2,000 loans, of which that accounts for about 70 to 80 Bitcoin per week in total volume on this platform. Right now, runes and ordinals are about 40 and 60% of the volume. Runes 40%, ordinals 60%. But I think the most interesting thing is there was a tweet that went out this past week, which said something to the tune of there are like 80 Bitcoin puppets which are in danger of getting liquidated. That is, the loans are about to close on these assets, and these Bitcoin puppets, one of the often the number one 10K PFP collection on Bitcoin. A lot of these puppets are about to be foreclosed on, to borrow the real estate term. But uh, I'll just without having I didn't like go too deep into this particular event, but I believe most of those were defaulted loans in the past 24 to 36 hours. That resulted in a nice a pretty punishing price dip on the puppets collection. If you just want to take a look at like this is one of my favorite charts to look at, which is what are the most degen collections, and we can look at this by the top ordinals collections. Uh, we can look at this by the top ordinals collections chart here, like which collections are loaning the most against their assets. So we see that consistently week on week out, the Bitcoin puppets are usually the most loaned against collection on Liquidium. So not surprising that these smooth brain degens are getting liquidated left and right. My shout out to my puppets though. We also have a lot of OMBs and Quantum Cats and Node Monks. This is kind of a story of just which are the biggest collections. And then also for runes volume, the runes that are being lent against the most are pups, which is interesting because pups is about currently 1/20th, I think, the size of the largest market cap rune, which is dog. And it accounts and pups consistently account for over half of the loan volume against runes on Liquidium. So shout out to my degenerate puppets. If only the new president of the United States could pump your bags. Um, Also, just in Rune's market update, it's funny because I think we are seeing, just my observation is that on the timeline, it looks like, we are seeing, uh, total disinterest in these fungible tokens. Yet, Runes account for $1 billion in market cap, according to this Genie data chart. I am trying to describe these charts if you're listening on RSS, but basically we're looking at the overall Runes market cap on Genie data, which peaked at about 2 billion last November and is now sitting at 1 billion. So drawdown of 50%. Yet the vibes are so low that they're almost like disinterested, which is interesting. It's $1 billion ecosystem. Ordinals also hundreds of millions of dollars of ecosystem. So what gives? Um, I don't know. Certainly, many of us are assuming that this ecosystem will pick up. Intuitively know that Bitcoin denominated assets do are should be positioned well. I don't know. I'm not going to try to sell you the moon here today. Catch me on a Twitter space talking about this, and I can elaborate further my thesis. Um, in other news this week, mempool.space. It's your favorite mempool explorer. Uh, it's an open source project. They released two versions of their website. They have their default explorer, mempool.space. I use it all the time. I pull it up here. But due to the division in the Bitcoin community about whether we wish to even acknowledge these assets as being legitimate Bitcoin transactions or whether we want to celebrate them as being fun Bitcoin denominated assets, these are perhaps irreconcilable differences. So, mempool.space this past week launched two variations of its site, mempoo.space and memepool.space. Take a wild guess which each one does. Here is memepool.space. You can see your classic, familiar mempool.space visualization, except some notable things. One, we have some confetti in the background. Two, all the text is in Comic Sans, connoting an air of seriousness. And then it automatically, by default, shows if a JPEG is in the block. If you're familiar, mempool.space has this great block visualization which shows transactions. And now you can see readily on site that there is a picture and a JPEG in this block, and you can hover over it, and it's super fun. You can also choose to see runes if you wish. But over on mempoo.space, you have just a visual, same fork, but it's a little more serious, with the exception of if it has a JPEG or any type of inscription, then it has the poop emoji sitting in there. Now, yes, this is kind of a fun little goofy project, but this is just to reiterate the same conversation we've been having for forever on this podcast and out there in the wild arena of Twitter that maybe you don't like them, but let me tell you, this mempoo.space is not very useful. In fact, just the purpose of an explorer is to usefully communicate what the hell is in these blocks and what the hell you're looking at. So even if you don't like it, memepool.space is a much more useful product than mempoo.space. And I would bet, I would love to see the traffic numbers after this. I would bet that memepool.space has significantly higher traffic numbers due to both its use and due to the fact that most people just actually want to most of the economic participants on Bitcoin right now are ordinals and runes and fungible token degens. Last to touch on this past week is I think it's important to note the landscape of wrapped Bitcoin or Bitcoin derivative assets on other chains. This is a major story which I think is not really being covered as much in the West right now. The West is kind of obsessed with just Bitcoin number go up stuff on ETFs. But we have here our friends over at Bitcoin Layers. Great useful chart, Bitcoin supply by wrapper. And you can see that the overall Bitcoin supply is at 329,000.3 Bitcoin. That's about 33 billion in Bitcoin, which is locked and wrapped and issued on another blockchain. You can see the majority of this is BitGo, under the ticker WBTC, with about a little under half, 129,000 of this Bitcoin. Binance and Coinbase are 2 and 3. You have new entrant to the wrapped Bitcoin game, Merlin, and then Lombard and Solve after that. I actually did some deeper dives on these liquid staking providers, Lombard and Solve, in a recent newsletter if you want to learn more about that. So, without further ado, I want to get to the kind of main conversation I want to have towards the end of this, which is my friend Alec over at Oyl Dynamics. I'm going to bring you up here. Welcome to Bitcoin Season 2, Alec. How's it going?
What's up? Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I know, like, I see in all my side chats, all the degens, like, they see a new word and they latch onto it and they will not relinquish until they figure out what it is. And the word of the past couple weeks, I've seen alkanes, which after I chat GPT'd it, is a reference to some kind of like molecular structure, which doesn't tell me a lot. But you guys released some docs, and I've been kind of trickling some information about this. Before we get into what alkanes is, I think it might help to throw to you like the problem statement. Like, what is the challenge of the Bitcoin ecosystem right now, from liquidity fragmentation, standards fragmentation? Why do we need to build anything?
Yeah, I mean, you name two big ones right off the bat. I think for me, there's kind of like three big problem statements that we're attacking with alkanes. And to give some background, we've been kind of known most for building the wallet and working with kind of Arthur Hayes and the Airhead collection. It wasn't until a few months back that we kind of really shared more of what we've been building over the past year. And so we kind of set out initially to build kind of like a full stack indexing and data tool to really help developers build more expressive applications on Bitcoin. And we've kind of explored this and figured this out along the way. But when BRC20 came out, when Dilma released BRC20, this new fungible standard built on top of ordinals, he was like, this is an experiment. This is no way. I don't think in any way this is the fungible standard. There's probably many more optimizations, et cetera. But here's something that's possible. And so for us, there was kind of this almost like shared delusion within kind of the team and what we're building, that there is much more that you can do on the indexer side than just ordinals. And so we kind of built this full indexing stack that was built to solve a lot of the initial problems that we were seeing with BRC20. You kind of looked at how that developed. You had a lack of really kind of like permissionless and open access to the indexer, which created like indexer wars, and just how what the trading experience actually was, and kind of seeing that grow out from there. And so there's been plenty of really great developments in kind of the fungible and meta protocol space. Runes obviously being something that Casey built is really incredible. But I think like there's three problems that I think alkane's attempts to solve in its design. First, like asset standards that exist today, primarily fungible asset standards, it's kind of more important with, they have limited programmability beyond the ability to deploy and issue assets and send and receive them. And they are kind of limited to what Bitcoin scripting can do beyond that. And so that's all good and fine. But the problem is liquidity really can't scale because you cannot have immediacy for users. And so you look at kind of the applications that have been built around this. You have PSPTs that are useful, but those are only one-sided order books. And because of some of the issues around that, and I think teams that have been built around that, these are mostly kind of hidden behind APIs, and so access is not unfettered. And I think too, so like even applications that are being built using like DLCs and other things, it's more of a peer-to-peer model unless you can build some off-chain or centralized or API behind it to do some type of order matching, which is what we've seen in some of these marketplaces that have been successful, versus kind of other ecosystems with illiquid and kind of emergent assets where you have some type of trustless order matching, or instead of P2P, you have like a peer-to-pool to peer kind of construction. So I think that's super critical. And the last thing is that, it kind of ties both of these problems together, is that they lack really permissionless access to that liquidity and composability in a shared space. So that limits interoperability both between these standards and between applications and experiences that are built with them, and that furthers that fragmentation in terms of the liquidity. So happy to kind of break any of those down.
Yeah. So we have this issue of a bunch of different standards, and Bitcoin doesn't really naturally play very well with these with users just issuing secondary assets on there. It's naturally a bit more clunky. Users demand the Solana, abstracted trading experience, and money and systems are kind of they're hamstring a bit. And at the same time, we have moats around the products where products that power these ecosystems, where access to the moat is in the form of like gated APIs or like platform kind of protection. This is natural, this is fine, but it like means the ecosystem really has difficulty talking to each other. So we did a conversation on Sandshrew, Metashrew way back in the day, and it's evolved since. But you're saying, okay, you kind of have to serve up indexing and a bit of a standards extension and probably a bunch of other stuff. So let's just get into the concept of proto-runes and alkanes. What are these? How do they fit together?
Yeah, so proto-runes really is kind of like a framework that we built on our indexing stack that enables you to build programmable meta protocols off of the rune standard. So it's built on the foundation of runes. It uses runestone messages, so we call them protostones. So even like if you send a proto-rune asset or any proto-rune meta protocol asset, you look at mempool space and you'll see that
It'll look kind of like a rune stone that I see in.
It will say it's a rune. It will say runestone message in the awk return.
Yeah, with additional like logic or language there, probably, if I were to actually look at the hex code.
Yeah, so proto-runes is that, and for us, like our initial like reason for building Sandshrew and Metashrew was, okay, here's this initial problem where you don't have open permissionless indexers. They're very difficult to coordinate upgrades or updates to go and run these in a way where it's open and permissionless, and you can actually go and see the state of it and see what the hash is. This is built for, we hope that BRC20 and Domo, when they think about swap modules or think about 2.0, they should adopt this, right? OpNet should adopt this, and then obviously kind of runes, okay. One of the other issues is with a lot of these standards is they're opinionated, right? There's rules around the ticker space. There's rules around what it can do, and it's kind of built based off of the creators' ideas of how they should see the world.
Casey's very opinionated, and so then that has been replicated across the ecosystem.
Yeah, and so for us, it's okay. Like we want to just give these tools so that you can build. Anybody can go spin up and build kind of an unopinionated version of this. So that's what proto-runes is. And so There was a lot of noise probably 6 months ago. Somebody was talking, was listening in on what we were doing. Kind of I think Isabel tweeted like programmable runes are coming, quicker than you think. And so we kind of like, okay, like we're building this.
I jumped on it too because like I knew without even talking to you or anybody, I was like, I know what this is about, and I was like, and I know where it's going, but it's a question of like, when do we get there?
Yeah, and so like initially we kind of were like, we want to be a service provider, and then we have all these open source frameworks. Anyone can run them, anyone can fork them, do whatever they want, and then we build services on top of that. We have we have a infrastructure that we can run. People, if they can kind of get the data or build an index, and then pay us to host that. And then the wallet, a lot of the kind of the data and services of the wallet that are built on top of that. So then we kind of got to the point where, okay, we've built this like monster stack that is built for this new era of programmability and programmable meta protocols, and now like maybe we're the only ones that can tame this beast. So Alkanes itself is built on proto-runes, and so it's a proto-runes meta protocol. And so the core difference is like out of the box, proto-runes, think of them like almost like an app chain meta protocol. So if you were to build an AMM and then someone were to build a lending app, these assets to those apps are not interoperable. And so you'd have to do some type of atomic swap. They're built off of the same standard. So, there's other things that you can go and do, but it's not like interoperable and composable. So Alkanes is something that we built that solves that problem. And Alkanes, it's built on the foundation of a rune. So, and it also, takes some of the ideas from ordinals as well. So how it works is you can deploy a smart contract as a gzipped WASM file. So you write a smart contract in Rust, compile it to WASM, and then it is put in the inscription envelope or the witness envelope.
Because you inscribe the program.
You inscribe the program, but it's in a gzipped WASM file. So
it's
very, very compact. So we have, if you go look at Judah FlexChop, his Twitter, he did a bunch of experiments where he forked Nor and he forked like Cairo, and he was able to put that in a WASM. And I think he put Cairo in a WASM under like 90 bytes. So there's a lot that you can go and do. And then the asset works similar to a rune. It uses like a protocol tag that's far out, so it won't make any breaking changes to runes. And in fact, like it makes it interoperable between a rune where you can actually swap these assets at some point in the future. But in the op return, and in the runestone message, this is where you actually have calls to the contract. So there's predetermined things where you can actually call a contract, someone deploys it, and you actually have full smart contract kind of programmability. So an Alkane is both an asset and it can be a smart contract, right? And so it really is kind of like ERC20s for everything. So now you have an asset and it's a little bit of a paradigm shift, because up front, it's not like, here's how you can deploy them, here's the minting rules, and then you can just send and receive them. It really opens up in an unopinionated way for developers to really decide how they can deploy and distribute their assets. So somebody could go build an ICO contract. Now this is on chain. It's deterministic. It's trustless. Uses the Bitcoin data availability for DA, and anybody can go look at that and say, this worked pretty good. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do something else. Or they can have like a stake to earn contract or a free mint contract, or they can put entire, Merkle root in do an airdrop where you can actually go and validate that on chain of kind of where it's going and deterministically kind of do the airdrop. So that's one piece of it, just around creation of the asset and determining its rules. And then it allows developers to build applications. And so I think I talked about kind of like one of these problems is like beyond permissionless access is composability and interoperability in a shared space. And so when you think about liquidity fragmentation, you have one-sided order books, but then people are building all these different experiences that don't really talk to each other, and everyone's siloing liquidity, whether it's to a layer 2 or to their multi-sig or coordinated multi-sig or somewhere over here. But that's only one of the issues. The other thing is that these applications can't talk to each other. So an example would be there's an AMM that's being built, and anyone can provide liquidity to this in a permissionless way. Trust assumptions are, they're not trusting a multi-sig, but anybody can go and reuse that liquidity or add that liquidity in their applications. So in the case of something like a pump.fun on Solana, right, that composes a bonding curve contract, an asset creation contract, and then that it gets deployed into an AMM, and then it kind of locks liquidity. So if you think about some of the applications that are being built on Alkanes right now, you have Subfrost, and Subfrost is a Bitcoin staking product that enables you to take Bitcoin, and that can be used in a meta protocol space, right? That now can be swapped for other Alkanes and used in applications. You have, we're building an AMM, and let's say somebody wanted to go and build a pump.fun, right? You could go and compose these together where, say, you create, somebody goes and creates an asset, and somebody wants to go buy on this bonding curve. Well, in one transaction, you can go from native Bitcoin, interacting with Subfrost, wrapping it to Frost Bitcoin, and then purchasing that on the bonding curve. And how Alkanes works is they're actually compact. You can call multiple contracts in one Bitcoin transaction. So that could happen all in one Bitcoin transaction, right? And then you can compose and actually move those things over. So you can have multiple apps that are composing together that add liquidity to the same shared space and use the same pools. Same thing happens in the case of something like lending, right? Lending, you have, okay, we've created these other pools for lending that have a special purpose. And then, what happens when a liquidation is triggered? Well, it can access an AMM for those pools to go and sell those assets and redistribute it back to the lender. So this kind of helps liquidity be shared among all the applications and enables kind of those assets to be interoperable. So that's one thing that I think is fairly critical that doesn't really exist today.
So maybe in the future, I'm speculating, I could, let's say, continue rolling these things out. We start to see some Bitcoin wrapped in Subfrost. I start to see maybe some of that TVL show up on, say, the Bitcoin Layers site that I just pulled up earlier. And instead of all these different wrapped Bitcoin products not being able to talk to each other directly, the vision is that you could see Alkanes effectively allow direct communication across these various protocols, because we have the magic of indexers and the ability to add kind of whatever rule set we want to through these runestone, proto-runestone messages. I forget exactly what I was reading through the docs trying to wrap my head. There's a bunch of new terms in the docs that I found really interesting. I think you guys might actually have this second place in terms of new names created behind Casey, just because of oh shit, that's a new word that
that's
a new
cell packs and fuel. And protostones,
Yeah.
it's our version of a runestone. But yeah, I mean, especially for those that use the indexing framework that we've built, and we've mostly built the scaffolding for assets that are like runes, because we just think that is the most kind of the design that is closest to kind of how Bitcoin works, and closest to Bitcoin scripting. But if somebody else went and built different standards or an EVM into that, or assets, you now could have interoperability between all these different meta protocols and assets through something like a Subfrost, and even through atomic swaps. The other thing that's really cool is within ALKANES itself, somebody actually created an NFT standard, and they called it Orbitals. Like, just some developer got in there and built it, right? Because we built it mostly thinking about the fungible use case, but really you could build 1,000 different standards that are maybe a little bit different, right? Think about it like in Ethereum, where there's ERC20 and there's a ERC 721, and there's a bunch of NFT standards, but it doesn't really matter because these assets are still interoperable together. It's just, if you want that to be used in your application, you just have to kind of like upgrade that contract or migrate it over. So there is going to be, this is the next iteration of experimentation. Like, adds complexity. There will be bugs. People will figure out things that are optimized, things that are more interesting. But it doesn't mean that somebody has to go and rebuild an entire like indexer from scratch. Beg wallets to go and use it. Beg infrastructure providers, people that have integrated it and started to use some of this infrastructure. Would be very non-trivial to kind of move forward with that. And then I think on the Rune side, there's kind of like a lot of it's really meant not to be like a replacement to Runes, but essentially like this gives Runes life, right? So we've been exploring with layer 2s and folks building like ZK rollups. And now I think the aha moment is you can have teleportation that's trustless, and build kind of a ZK verifier and a ZK bridge, where essentially you can just teleport runes or ALKANES directly to kind of an L2 environment, which I think is really exciting, right? So yeah, there's a lot that kind of people have started to dive into. I think, again, like, we very purposely launched during the inauguration. We didn't want to
You
have
guys are actually technically live. I think it didn't try to like really do a whole push and like really there's not a huge like social push, I see.
Yeah, I mean, we just barely kind of announced about an hour ago, and mostly just kind of released the documentation. But the thing is like, it's going to take time for people to wrap their head around it, in the sense that it's not like, here's the rules for issuance. You just build an etching or an inscription tool, and then have at it and trade with PSBTs. I think it would be what I didn't want to happen was like a run on people trying to have turf wars over creating the first ticker. But two, like, I didn't want people to inscribe it, create a bunch of these assets and then trade them with PSBTs. And then it's like, this is literally the same thing as a rune. Like, there's no difference, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we were kind of very intentional. Like, really, we kind of like want to attract developers. We had built a bunch of proof of concept stuff, like a tool where you could do an airdrop, a free mint, a gated mint, a bunch of other stuff, and it like looked like an inscription tool. Built this little like explore app and things, and I was like, I don't want people to like do this and think, there's nothing to go build, but also just start to build stuff without really understanding it. And so intentionally, there's a lot of room for people to build kind of the tools and flashlights around it to make it more useful. But day one, we have an open source indexer, access to an ALKANES RPC. We just open sourced the Oyl Wallet SDK. So the SDK everything that we use in the wallet to build transactions, to build PSPTs, to get runes by address, to get alkanes by address, to build contracts. That's all completely live. You can do it with a CLI, which is really cool. So that's useful for wallets or people that want to run their own infrastructure and go mess around. And then we have like example contracts that you can go and build. So really, like I kind of want people to really focus on the development side, be attracted to complexity, and go build with people that are building kind of these applications, right? And then these are being built out right now, but I want kind of the community and developer community to kind of explore this and kind of see what happens.
So that's it. A call to developers, specifically, I think probably application developers. That's a very that is the white whale. How do you get the crazy application volume that we see on Solana? How do you get that to touch Bitcoin or just in closer proximity to Bitcoin? So, Alec, thanks for coming on and hand-holding me through this this system with a bunch of new names and terms. What's the call to action? Where do people go to if they want to go down this rabbit hole more?
Yeah, so I would say, look at Oyl Wallet's recent tweet. The docs are alkanes.build. That has links to all of the underlying repos, has like a great learn section. It has links also to the Alkanes Discord, and there's kind of more links there with kind of blogs, etc. But Flex, our CTO, he's in the chat. The Oyl Wallet team's in there. A lot of kind of the initial people that are building stuff. And I would also say follow Judo Flex Chop for if you want more like dense kind of developer updates.
Yeah, if you like GitHub and if you like terms like WASM, then follow Judo Flex Shop. He's the guy. Alec, thank you so much for coming on the pod, and I'll see you more throughout 2025.
All right, man.
Peace.
See ya.